Hey, welcome back to my shop. So I wanted to make some shutters for my house, and I thought I'll start on the closet window. It's the only window that I don't have any coverings for, and I thought that'd be a good place to see if I could make these. So I was going to make my own louvers, and then with the price of lumber, it kind of seemed like maybe it would be just as reasonable to buy the pre-made louvers from Rockler. And when I looked at those, about $4 a piece, pretty good value. I thought, well, maybe I should check Stardust, which is a reclaimed building supply store here in Mesa, Arizona. Restore by Habitat can also have some cool reclaimed things. And so I thought, well, I'll check there first. And they had a whole selection of shutters. And I was able to pick up this one for $7. So each louver is only about 43 cents, which is extremely great value. Plus they're wider than the Rockler one, so I'm actually going to be able to get two out of these for the window that I need. I'm going to do a bifold. So the louvers themselves are over 19 inches as opposed to the 16-inch ones there. The width of this is actually about the width that I need, but given that it's a small space, I don't want to do one big shutter to open. I'm going to make it into two. So I'm going to be able to cut these down in half nicely. It appears by the edge that there's good grain, so they appear to be solid wood. But we're going to break this down and see if we can make this work. All right? So breaking this down, we need to remove all of the hardware first. And we're going to save these hinges because we're going to be able to reuse those so we don't have to buy them for our final product. And to get this control arm out of here, I'm just going to use some little wire snippers. I tried to just pull them out, and that was pretty clearly going to destroy the louver, so I figured clipping them out was actually a lot faster option. And then I used one of these multi-tools to break this apart because I didn't know if there'd be any hidden screws or nails or anything. I didn't look like there would be, but you never know. So at least that way I wouldn't be destroying a good blade. Sanding them down was a pain, but they had this really deep ridge look, and I didn't like that. So I wanted them smooth, but you could just rough them up and paint them. You wouldn't have to do this. I wanted to do a hidden control arm, so it's going to be a bar that goes in the back. Now Rockler makes one of these, and it's like 15 bucks, but it was going to be $9 to ship and take 2 weeks to get here. And mostly I just didn't want to wait for that. So I decided to make my own. So I just used these little pieces of aluminum, and these are spaced out every 3 inches. So I did the little wooden mock-up first just to make sure that I had a pretty good plan. And so I'm just going to, mark my spots to punch all the holes. And then the aluminum cuts just fine on my bandsaw. So obviously just purchasing one of these if you live near Rockler would be a lot faster, but this totally worked pretty well. Since lumber prices are ridiculously expensive right now, I wanted to use as much of the previous materials as I could. So I'm cutting down the stiles a little bit. I'm going to be able to reuse both of those. I'm also going to be able to reuse the rails. I will have to use a little bit of my precious lumber to make the two middle stiles. So I'm going to rip down a piece here and then take it to the router table. And here I'm just going to router out so that they overlap. And these doors are going to be a right over left. So you'd always open the right door first. And by doing it this way, it'll block any light from coming through the center. The old styles make a really nice template to use on the new styles as well. So I'm just going to mark out straight across where my holes are going to be, and then take it to the drill press and go ahead and just get those ready for the pins on the louvers. I'm building a very simple frame for around the shutters to go into the window itself. And in order to get these dimensions, you want to measure your windows at the top, the middle, and the bottom, as well as the left, the middle, and the right. And then you want to take the smallest of those dimensions and then knock another 1/4 of an inch off, because your window's never going to be completely square. So you want your frame to actually be a little bit undersized. Adding another little piece of lumber here, and I'm using these little shims to hold it up at just the right height so that everything will be flush when the shutters are closed, and this will prevent light from getting in around the outside of the shutters. Trimming my stiles down to their final dimensions. I know a lot of people hate math, so I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. We're trying to figure out the dimension of our rails. So I have my 4 stiles lined up together, the middle ones overlapping the way that they would be, and I'm measuring them with the gap that I will need. And I'm taking my outside frame, which is the 20 5/8, minusing the number that I just got. And then from there, once I have that, I can just divide that by 2. And using these free apps of fraction calculators, I'm able to figure out that I need to cut these to exactly 7 5/8. Fortunately, the original rails are wide enough for me to get all 4 current rails, which is great because they already have routed out spots for the louvers when they go up and down. I'm going to double check my measurements again before I glue everything together. So I just need to mark off and then trim these down to their final height. I'm using one of the extra louvers to check the size here and make sure that I have the width just right before I cut into the ones that I put the effort into sanding. I made a very simple jig out of a piece of aluminum where I just found the exact center point for where the louver is going to be, and I checked it by drilling it from both directions and it was dead center. So on all of these, I just need to go ahead and drill in the other side. In order for the rear control arm to work, I need to take a little tiny bit off of each louver on one side. And my aluminum's a 1/16 of an inch, so I'm going just a little bit more than a 1/16 of an inch, and I went about 3/4 of an inch tall. When I cut the original shutter frame open, I realized that it was held together by dowels, and I figure if it was good enough for those big shutters, it's definitely good enough for this. So I'm gonna just put in a couple of dowels to make a really nice sturdy frame. I gave everything a nice gentle round over, 1/8 inch round over, before I glued everything together, and here is the final frames. A sprayer would have been really, really convenient at this point because this is a lot of sides of things to paint. So I started with a brush, did a coat that way, and then I realized that a foam roller was a little bit faster, but I really would have preferred the finish of a sprayer. Luckily, there were enough extra pins on the additional louvers, so I didn't have to purchase anything there. So I'm just getting these all set in, and the middle one, you'll see you actually have to take the pins out. That's going to be my tension louver, so that's actually going to have screws going through on both sides, so you can adjust how much tension you have. That way you're able to move the shutters and have them stay wherever you leave them. To attach the rear hidden control arm, I'm using the smallest little drill bit that I have to make a tiny little starter hole, and then I'm using some small nails that have a big enough head on them to be able to hold that in place. Not gonna lie, I was really excited when my makeshift control arm worked so well. Here's a view from the back so you can hopefully see a little bit better exactly how it works. I'm reusing the original hinges and just painting them white with some Rust-Oleum paint that sticks well to metal. I'm checking the layout here and I'm using plastic shims around it to make sure that I have an even gap everywhere. And then I'm going to go ahead and install these hinges. Since I had the shutter but not the frame when I purchased it, I had the metal little plate for the magnet, so I reused that and then just used a couple little magnets that I had in the shop. And at this point, I'm pretty much doing a happy dance, but don't worry, I do that off camera. Since windows are never actually square, I'm going to use this shadow gap technique that I saw on Open and Shut, a UK company. So I'm just going to put a little bit of insulation, foam insulation around the frame. And when we put it in the window, then it's going to make a slight shadow effect around the frame. And then you're able to see the actual squareness of the frame instead of filling it with a bunch of caulk that might crack over time, and then that just shows how unsquare the window was itself. So I really think that this worked out quite well. So to take the frame and the shutters apart, I just removed the pins from the hinges. So then it's really easy when you go to install it. You just have to stick the pins back in. The bottom one slid right in. The top one, I just had to give it a few taps. And my silly dog Charlie always loves to get in on the action, so he wanted to partake in this, and of course doesn't want me to use my arm for anything but petting him. Overall, I learned a lot by doing these. Mostly that if you have time but not a lot of money, this is absolutely the way to go. But it is quite time consuming. So I'm very happy with the final product. And like I said, I learned a lot. And hopefully, if I do decide to build shutters for the rest of my house, I'll now have a much better knowledge base to pull from. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more DIY projects.